Welcome, Tarnished. Today we're going to return from the realms of Olympus and take a look at a pure melee focused build, the Cold Flame Wraith. My stats for this build are 60 vigor, 14 mind, 25 endurance, 80 strength, 25 dexterity. I suggest starting as the Vagabond for stat allocation. Unlike the other builds I have done before this, I wanted to specifically go through the game with melee weapons, lacking any real long range attacks, and playing a strength build without the massive colossal weapons. I decided to use two weapons, well, three technically, a great sword and two straight swords. This build is going to be broken down into two categories, PVE and PvP. With that out of the way, we can start analyzing the armor and equipment of the Cold Flame Wraith. The armor I picked for this build is the Knight Cavalry set, with the chest piece being altered to remove the cloak to give a more Black Knight look to this forlorn warrior. You get this for slaying the Knight's Cavalry in the snowy regions north of the consecrated snowfields. From the inner consecrated snowfield site of grace at night, look southwest. Find the carriage that's being pulled by trolls. Kill both and you can loot the armor from them. With this set along with the altered chest piece, we will have 40 poise. Like the Godslayer Black Flame build, we will be relying on our finesse in combat instead of trading blows. The Cold Flame Wraith's arsenal is easier to obtain early on. All you need to do is grab two Lordsworn straight swords. The best place to farm this sword is the Gatefront Ruins by killing the soldiers in the camp there. The Claymore, however, is found within Castle Morn. From the main courtyard, hug the right wall and go past the burning pile of bodies. There is a path that leads to the entrance to the building. The sword can be found in a chest here. The weapons, however, are quite simple. It's the ashes that we put on them that will bring the build together. For our Lordsworn blades, we will be using the Cold Affinity with both of them, along with our main hand using the Hoarfrost Stomp Ash of War, which can be found here. East of the Carrier Manor, look for glowing footprints near the shallow bodies of water. This Ash of War may have been nerfed, but is still quite powerful in a lot of encounters. I use it for massive waves of enemies, or for hitting the boss at a safer distance to get a Frostbite proc before switching to the Claymore. To make both of our weapons cold, we need the Glintstone Wet Blade, which is found in the Rhea Lucaria Academy, hanging off the office balcony in the room here with all the mages protecting it next to the staircase. At plus 25, the swords have a split damage of 198 physical and 158 magical, with a cold buildup of 105. A flat C scaling for strength and dexterity and intellect, but while the damage on its own is a little on the average side, the frost buildup with these swords is nearly instant on most enemies. But with our stats, the swords reach a solid AR of 523. Even with the split damage, they still put in work for what our build is trying to accomplish, and that's not even considering the Rotten Wings sword insignia, which I'll explain later on in the video. I put the Chilling Mist Ash of War in my offhand, though it's only for the Cold Affinity. While this lowers our scaling for the weapons as previously mentioned, the Frostbite damage that procs off our L1s is what matters the most. It is only a few swings and it'll proc the Frostbite, which plays in our next Ash of War. Flame of the Redmanes. Produce a powerful burst of flames in a wide frontward arc. It is used in all melee weapons. It is by far the hardest hitting fire Ash of War in the game, breaking the guard of most enemies and bosses in just a few hits. It also has a really wide range of attack that lingers for a decent time too. With the Shard of Alexander, this can be the most busted Ash of War in the game, carrying any build for the most part. And while we are putting this on the Claymore, it can be even more effective with a stronger weapon if you so decide. The Ash of War does a solid 40 poise damage. Not only can it break the guards of most bosses in 3 to 4 casts, we combine this with our fire damage increase within our flask, with the Flame Shrouding Cracketeer. The Flame of the Redmanes can be found here in Caelid, dropped by an invisible teardrop scarab in front of Fort Gale North Site of Grace. To add on to that, the Claymore with its fire affinity at plus 25 has a split damage rating of 226 physical and 226 fire. With our stats, it has a nice AR of 762. Even with the split damage with fire, it still puts out quite solid damage numbers on attack. Not only that, the fire staggers a lot of enemies when inflicted. With our basic arsenal complete, we will now be going over the weapon moveset of the Lordsworn blades first. The one-handed light attacks swipe forward with each step in a horizontal fashion like other straight swords, up to a 5-hit attack chain. They will come out relatively fast and isn't a bad option compared to the power stance light attacks on both blades. The power stance attack chain doesn't reach the 5-hit chain that the one-handed variant does. but it instead slashes forward each time with both blades until the third attack, which thrusts both of the blades forward, back into another slash. This is our go-to attack for these weapons outside the Ash of War. It applies Frostbite quickly, as previously mentioned, and also builds up the ramping damage on our talisman. The heavy one-handed, uncharged attack consists of the 2-hit attack chain, a thrust forward followed by an upwards vertical slash on the second hit. The charge variant is the same, just slower and much more poise damage on each hit. It is quite good to use when you can get a drop on a bigger enemy. The jumping attacks are also a safe option with some good damage as well for the power stance attacks. A downward strike onto the target from above with a crossing slash of the blades. You can never go wrong with jump attacks in this game. When used right, they can be evasive attack options against foes. I wouldn't bother with the normal one-handed jumping attacks. If you are going to jump attack without using the power stance moveset, then default to the heavy R2 plunge attack. Now onto the running attack. Comparing the power stance running attack of the L1 to the normal running attack of the R1, you can see there's quite a difference. The running L1 starts with a lunging stab from the offhand weapon into a frontward slash from the main hand. It isn't as easy to land on some targets as the normal attack on the right side of the screen. Does more damage, and is good at proccing the Frostbite on our talisman. The R1, however, is a forward slash. Nothing special in the matter, but it can be good for a quick chase down attack nonetheless. Lastly, the running heavy attack is a vertical downward slam, also good for engaging. Bigger damage than in the normal attacks, can stagger most fodder enemies quite easily too, not a bad option. Keep in mind one thing though, once you proc the Frostbite buildup, you can reset it by touching them with the Fire Affinity Claymore, switching back to these blades to proc it once again for big damage. Now moving on to the heavier weapon, the Claymore. The Baymores are a flame-infused greatsword, truly the biggest hitter in our arsenal. The moveset is arguably the best moveset in this game for greatsword. Sorry Dark Souls 3 Hollow Slayer moveset. The one-handed moveset alongside the two-handed light attacks both have the 4-hit attack string. The two-handed variant has more power, but is better for only hitting 1 or 2 targets in front of you, with vertical slashes that lunge forward each strike. Meanwhile, the one-handed light variant is a cleave with 3 hits, to a wide vertical like slash at the end of a 4-string combo. While it isn't bad to do that, it would be ideal just to two-hand the greatsword and space your foes along with using the Ash of War for cleaving. The heavy attacks on the two-handed variant lunge forward with a thrust, slamming into the targets with some really nice range. It can be charged to do the same thing but with more damage and poise damage, breaking guards on a lot of normal enemies, just like how you would with the Lord Sworn blades. The one-handed versions are the same, just less damage. I would still stick with the two-handed variant if you're going to opt to do an R2 or something, though it can still be charged all the same. The running attack on the two-handed and one-handed attacks are very similar. Both work a tad bit differently than each other. The one-handed running light attack is a horizontal swing that comes out at average speed, really good for chasing down or initiation on a cleave if you wish to go in with your melee weapon over an Ash of War attack. The two-handed variant, however, is a downward slam. Again, very good for chasing down targets, with a bit of a lunge forward and more power to the swing, along with the range of the attack being extended more so than the more in-place cleave of the one-handed attack. The heavy attacks for both these weapons are strong forward slashes, the one-handed being a normal vertical slam, while the two-handed being a flashy spinning vertical slash forward. While the one-handed is faster and more reliable, the two-handed is honestly much more powerful, can cleave through more than one target with the momentum, and honestly, way more cooler. Just look how sweet this move is. God, I love the Claymore. To finish up this beautiful Blades moveset, we'll talk about the jumping attacks and the crouching attacks. The one-handed and two-handed moveset is identical. Ideally, you want to stick with the two-handed variants for strictly more attack power. The light attack is a sweeping slash as you fall forward, good for clipping targets and cleaving on an approach, while the heavy is a dominating plunge that deals heavy damage upon hitting a foe. What makes the Claymore a bit more special is the crouching attacks. While the one-handed light variant is just a normal downward slam, the two-handed attack is similar to that of a colossal greatsword pokes that you see everyone and their Tarnished mothers use. Jokes aside, it's a really good option of an attack after you roll, or if you want a quick option to engage nonetheless. Overall, the Claymore is a solid greatsword. While it may not have the strength scaling like the Iron Greatsword, it however will treat you right once you learn how to wield it. Also to add, as I'm recording this video, the new patch 1.06 buffed great weapons, including the Greatsword's recovery speed on their R2 attacks and jumping attacks. That's also something to keep in mind as well. Now that we cover the basics of the simple yet efficient build of the Frozen Fury that the Cold Flame Wraith brings forth, we are going to go into a more detailed part of the video, explaining what the talismans and flasks I use on the build, as well as where to find them. If you made it this far, do me a favor and like and subscribe, as well as share this video with anyone who loves the Claymore. Every little bit helps, and I truly appreciate all of you who have joined me so far on this journey, so thank you. But enough of that, let's get into it. The Cold Flame Wraith, Spectral Knight of Fury, Vengeance Incarnate. You have been cursed to bring a destructive wake across the lands between. Your arsenal doesn't change much really between PvE and PvP, besides a swap of one talisman I like to use for flavor. The other ones I recommend are Crimson Medallion +2. An overall good medallion on any build, especially for survival on melee builds. Each rank of this medallion brings an HP increase as follows: 6%, 7% for the +1, 8% for the +2 upgrade. You could use the Erdtree's Favor instead, but I recommend the Crimson Amber Medallion since it brings a solid 4% more HP increase comparing both of the +2 variants of the talismans. You can get the +1 medallion in Volcano Manor. If you have not yet made it past Malekith, it is located here, down from the prison town church site of Grace. Go out and down into the town as if you're playing as normal. Use the Stone Sword key here on the Fog Gate. Run past the Abductor Virgin and up the stairs. Loot it from this body here. The +2 version can be found after Leyendell has turned to ash. Drop down from the sewer grate here, onto the wooden beam below, careful for the fall. The second talisman for this build, and the most important one for this build, is Shard of Alexander. This talisman is extremely broken for Ashes of War, especially stronger ones like our Hoarfrost Stomp and the absolutely ridiculous Flame of the Redmane, increasing the damage by 15%, which stacks multiplicatively with our Flame Shrouded Crack tier, a massive fire damage nuke that can truly be spammed to your heart's content. It is the best ability that you have in your arsenal, so feel free to abuse it if you want. It's pretty safe for the most part. You can get this from completing Alexander's questline. You can, however, opt to use the Warrior Shard, but I suggest sticking out the questline until you can get this amazing talisman. This follows into our next talisman, Carrion Filigree Crest, which reduces the FP cost of skills by 25%. This is purchased from War Counselor EG as part of the Goodest Boys questline. This combined with the Shard of Alexander creates a devastating Ash of War machine if you so wish to use them as often as you can, which I suggest. Lastly, we move on to the Rotted Wing Sword Insignia. This talisman increases attack power with successful attacks. The number of attacks you land increases tiers. This will be important for building damage with our Lordsworn blades. The tiers follow: 6%, 8%, 13%. Effect activates after 3 hits regardless of class, so using them on our fast weapons will not only give us the damage bonus from our consecutive attacks, but also it adds even more damage on top of the total damage we're doing with the Frostbite proc as well. An aggressive option for our main weapons, though it isn't as good for our Claymore as it is slower than our straight swords, but this offsets the reliant style of spamming Flame of the Redmanes. The talisman is received from completing Millicent's questline and aiding her against her sisters. If for some reason you cannot complete it, you can opt to use the lesser version of the talisman. The Winged Sword Insignia scales as followed: 3%, 5%, and 10%. I personally use this one the whole game, and the damage difference is hardly noticeable at the highest tier, but at the lowest, it's very noticeable. Not a bad option either way, since you can be swapping back and forth between the Claymore and the Lordsworn blades. You can find the Winged Sword Insignia in the Stillwater Cave, dropped by the Cleanrot Knight boss upon defeat. Now moving on to the flask mixtures. Truthfully, you can go about this 2 ways, survival or damage. If we take the damage route, you'll be picking up these 2 tiers. Thorny Crack tier increases attacks with consecutive hits. Similar to our Winged Sword Insignia, it stacks multiplicatively with the talisman. Lasts 3 whole minutes, increases damage done by 9%, 13%, and 20%. This is one of the most damaging tiers to have with this build that really relies on the Winged Sword insignia and the Frostbite damage on Lordsworn blades, as well as the speed of the attack. You can find this crystal tier here by slaying the Putrid Avatar at the Minor Erd Tree in the Consecrated Snowfield east of Ordinia, Liturgical Town. If you're going to rely more on the Claymore for the massive damage flames the Redmanes can produce, you'll want to go with the Flame Shroud and Crack tier. It lasts a solid 3 minutes, fire attacks increase by 20%, this will allow you to nuke things even faster, giving the 20% increase on the flask as well as 15% with the increase of Shard of Alexander. It gives a massive increase in fire damage for a long duration, enough to obliterate most enemies and bosses. You can find this by defeating the Erd Tree Avatar found in the Minor Erd Tree in Caelid, east of the Smoldering Church here. For more survival, you can opt out of the damage tiers for one of the more defensive ones. I personally like these two, and I swap between them often. Crimson Burst Crystal tier provides a heal over time buff for 3 minutes, restoring 7 HP per second, heals a maximum of 1,260 HP total. This overall is one of the first tiers you'll find in the game, a nice choice for the heal over time, especially if you want to conserve on healing flask while clearing out enemies, or if you need that little bit of heal over time during a boss encounter. You can find it here in the Weeping Peninsula, beneath the Minor Erd Tree after killing the Avatar boss. Crimson Bubble tier restores 30% of max HP when health is at 20% or lower. Effect lasts a solid 3 minutes, but you cannot use these two together since the effect cancels out whenever HP restoration activates. Over one of these two can be swapped out with whatever flask you wish to use and combine it with giving you a bit more defensive options for play. You can find this by executing the Erd Tree Avatar, guarding the Minor Erd Tree east of the Mountaintops of Giants here. Now that you have these tools, you can walk the lands between as the Cold Flame Wraith, an unforgiving knight that will not stop for anything until vengeance has been brought down upon the foes that stand in your way. In PvP, your setup is pretty straightforward, with your talismans and flasks. While there is room to wiggle with your flask mixtures, I found using this setup works pretty well in duels and the very few evasions I came across at the time. Starting off with the talisman setup we're running, Shard of Alexander. This talisman is mandatory. Without our stronger Ashes of War like Hoarfrost Stomp and the absolutely ridiculous Flame of the Redmanes, would not nearly be as effective against other Tarnished. Increases the damage by 15%, which stacks multiplicatively with our Flamed Shrouded Crack tier. A massive fire damage nuke that will char anyone to a crisp that is caught within its wave of fire. It can borderline one-shot somebody if they aren't careful. But on the other side of the talisman's potential, it allows our Hoarfrost Stomp to pack even more of a punch for free aiming into someone's dodge path to keep in mid-range defensive players on their toes. It doesn't cost a lot to use in comparison to our Flame of the Redmanes, but it covers a lot more ground, comes out faster, and can really trick people up if you can guess what direction they want to run. This follows into our next talisman, Carrion Filigree Crest, which reduces the FP cost of skills by 25%. This is purchased from War Counselor EG as part of Goodest Boys questline. This, combined with the Shard of Alexander, allows you to make good use of the fact that you'll be using Ashes of War quite a bit with this build for those who wish to keep at a distance. Next up, we have the Crimson Amber Medallion +2. An overall good medallion on any build, especially survival and melee build. Each rank of this medallion brings an HP increase as follows: 6%, 7% for the +1, 8% for the +2 upgrade. You can use the Erd Tree's favor instead, but I seriously recommend the Crimson Amber Medallion since it brings up a solid 4% more HP increase comparing to the +2 versions of the talisman. You can get the +1 medallion in the Volcano Manor if you have not made it past Malekith. It is located here, down from the prison town church site of Grace. Go out and down in the town as if you're playing as normal, use the stone sword key here on the fog gate, run past the Virgin and upstairs, loot it from the body here. The +2 version can be found after Landale's turn to Ash, drop down into the sewer grate here, onto the wooden beam below. Be careful to fall. Our last talisman in this slot is one that will help with our damage on our Lordsworn swords, especially whenever we can punish over-aggressive players and roll catch fleeing foes. The Rotted Wing Sword Insignia. This talisman increases our attack power with successful attacks. The number of attacks you land increases tiers. This will be important for building damage with the Lordsworn blades, and the tiers follow: 6%, 8%, 13%. Effect activates after 3 hits regardless of class, so using them with our fast weapons will not only give us a damage bonus on consecutive attacks, but also adds even more damage on top of the total damage you're doing with the Frostbite proc as well. An aggressive option for our main weapons, though it isn't as good for our Claymore as it is slower than our straight swords, but this offsets the Reliant style of spamming Flame of the Redmanes in hope of getting that massive one-shot potential. This talisman is received from completing Millicent's questline and aiding her against her sisters. For some reason, if you cannot complete it, you can opt to use a lesser version of the talisman. The Winged Sword Insignia scales as follows: 3%, 5%, 10%. I personally use this on the whole game, and the difference between is hardly noticeable at the highest tier, but at the very lowest tier, it's very noticeable. Not a bad way either way, and even in duels, I noticed it still helped me come out on top against Tarnished who kept running into my sword. It rewards you for doing your job and landing hits, and you can't go wrong with that. You can find the Winged Sword Insignia in the Stillwater Cave, dropped by the Clean Rot Knight boss upon defeat here. Now into our flask mixtures. For me personally, I like the defensive one since the damage is already high enough in this game for PvP that I don't really bother on the short-term damaging flask, so I keep it simple and use these two: the Crimson Bubble tier and the Flame Shrouded Crack tier. To start with, the Crimson Bubble tier restores 30% of max HP when health is at 20% or lower. Effect lasts for a solid 3 minutes, and the effect cancels whenever HP restoration activates. This is sort of like Tears of Denial from Dark Souls 3, as most people know by now. It will keep you from dying to something in 2 hits, allowing you to recover if need be, but it doesn't make you invincible. If you take damage more than what the tier can recover, you will die anyhow. It is however good if you mess up and get caught out. The best defensive option you can get in PvP, to be quite honest, unless you're fighting spellcasters, but even so, this one is my go-to. You can find this by executing the Erdtree avatar guarding the minor Erdtree east of the mountaintops of giants here. And lastly, our longer lasting damaging buff, the Flame Shrouded Crack tier. It lasts a solid 3 minutes. Fire attacks increase by 15% in PvP. Even if it's a 5% lower than the PvE normal, it will still allow our Flames of the Redmanes to hit harder, as well as our Fire Affinity Claymore. The 15% increase with the Shard of Alexander stacks multiplicatively with this, so keep that in mind as well. You can find us by defeating the Erdtree avatar found in the minor Erdtree in Caelid, east of the Smoldering Church here. Unlike Zeus, this build relies much more on spacing with your weapons. If I had a tip for this build, learn how to free aim your Hoarfrost Stomp and Flame of the Redmanes. It's a bit tricky for the Fire Ash of War, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be catching many people off guard. Hey guys, for those of you that skipped to the sections important to you or stuck around this long, I wanted to say thank you again for your support. These videos are fun to make, and I really enjoy putting a lot of my time and effort into them. There's nothing more fun to me than these games and these themed builds, and I will continue to do so. We're almost at 500 subscribers, and I know we can get there with just a few more videos. So again, thank you all for sticking around and commenting. I love interacting with all you in the comments below as much as I can, seeing comments on different takes to my choice within these builds, or better ideas to improve upon them. You are all great, and I hope you enjoy this build as much as I do. If you have any ideas for builds you would like to see me try, leave them in a comment below. I have a list of some ideas I pulled from you guys already. But before I roll the outro, allow me to introduce you to the next upcoming build in the series. I think you are all quite familiar with this one, and I'll see you in the next video, Tarnished.